Warning: every story hides a chilling twist that will leave you questioning reality. Whether fact or fiction, secrets unravel, mysteries deepen, and nothing is as it seems. Stay until the very last second to uncover the truth.
Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
A quiet escape. In the heart of rural Maine lies Black Pines, a small, forgotten town surrounded by endless forest. It's the kind of place that doesn't show up on most maps, where phone signals vanish and time itself seems to stand still. The town had fewer than 200 residents, all of whom shared the same solemn expressions and a tendency to speak in whispers. Black Pines wasn't a place people moved to. It was the kind of place people either fled or stayed in forever. Emma and her husband, Jack, had never heard of Black Pines until they were looking for a quiet escape from their chaotic lives in New York City. Both teachers, they had dreamed of leaving the city for a simpler life, where Jack could write his novel and Emma could focus on photography. When they saw the listing for an old farmhouse on the edge of Black Pines, it seemed perfect. A spacious home, affordable price, and surrounded by nothing but nature. It was everything they wanted. The couple arrived on a chilly October evening, with the sun dipping low behind the trees, casting long shadows over the driveway. The house stood solemnly at the end of a gravel road, its chipped white paint and sagging porch giving it a weathered charm. The real estate agent, a quiet man named Mr. Thatcher, handed them the keys without much ceremony. "You'll find it peaceful here," he said, his eyes lingering on the dark woods behind the house. "But don't wander too far into the forest. It's easy to get lost." Jack laughed, brushing off the comment. "We'll stick to the trails," he said. But Emma noticed the way Mr. Thatcher's hands trembled as he turned to leave. The forest beckons. Their first few days in Black Pines passed uneventfully. Emma spent her mornings taking photographs of the golden autumn leaves, while Jack rode 4 hours in the upstairs study. The locals were polite but distant, rarely making eye contact and offering only brief, cryptic conversations. It wasn't until Emma ventured deeper into the woods behind their house that she began to feel something was off. The air in the forest seemed heavier, colder, even during the day. The silence was unnerving. Not a single bird sang, and the usual hum of insects was absent. On her third morning walk, Emma found something peculiar. A circle of stones, arranged neatly in the middle of a small clearing. Each stone was the size of a fist and unnaturally smooth. In the center of the circle lay a pile of ashes. The sight unsettled her, but she convinced herself it was just some local kids messing around. That night, as they sat by the fireplace, Emma told Jack about the stones. He shrugged it off. Probably just some kind of old tradition. These small towns are full of superstitions. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The whispering. The first real sign that something was wrong came a week after they moved in. Emma woke in the middle of the night to the sound of faint whispering. At first, she thought Jack was talking in his sleep, but when she turned over, she saw that he was soundly asleep beside her. The whispers were soft but distinct, like voices carried on the wind. Emma strained to hear the words, but they were incomprehensible. Gathering her courage, she tiptoed to the window. The moon cast an eerie glow over the backyard, illuminating the edge of the forest. At first, she saw nothing. Then, at the very edge of the tree line, something moved. A figure stood there, its outline barely distinguishable from the shadows of the trees. Emma froze, her breath catching in her throat. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. When Emma finally blinked, it was gone. The missing dog. The next morning, Emma tried to rationalize what she had seen. Perhaps it was just her imagination, or maybe one of the locals wandering the woods. She didn't mention it to Jack, not wanting to alarm him. Later that day, as Emma was editing photos in the kitchen, she noticed a dog wandering into their yard. It was a scruffy black lab mix with a worn collar. The dog seemed friendly, wagging its tail as Emma approached with a bowl of water. She knelt down to pet it, and as she did, she noticed something odd. The dog's fur was damp, as if it had been swimming, but there were no lakes or streams nearby. The dog stayed with them for most of the day, following Emma around as she worked in the yard. But as dusk fell, the dog began to grow restless. It stood at the edge of the woods, staring into the trees and growling softly. "Come on, boy," Emma called, but the dog didn't budge. That night, the dog vanished. They searched the yard with flashlights, calling for it, but there was no sign of it. The only thing they found was a fresh circle of stones in the clearing behind their house. The vanishing. That night, Jack insisted on going into the woods to put an end to this nonsense. Emma begged him not to go, but he was adamant. "It's just superstition," he said, grabbing a flashlight and a knife. Hours passed, and Jack didn't return. Emma paced the living room, her anxiety growing with every minute. Finally, unable to wait any longer, she ventured into the woods with a lantern. The forest was darker than she had ever seen it, the trees looming like silent sentinels. She followed the faint trail Jack had left, calling his name. Then she found it. A fresh circle of stones, larger than any she had seen before. In the center was Jack's flashlight, still on. And just beyond the stones stood a figure. At first, Emma thought it was Jack, but as she stepped closer, she realized something was wrong. The figure looked like Jack, but its movements were jerky, its face frozen in an unnatural smile. "Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure tilted its head, mimicking her movements. Then it whispered, "Leave." Epilogue. Emma never found Jack. The townspeople were no help, their faces filled with quiet pity when she asked for assistance. She left Black Pines a week later, unable to stay in the house any longer. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. At the edge of the woods, a figure stood, watching her go. It smiled.